Hey guys, tonight we slip into the dim and resin-scented world of candle and lamp makers in 18th century Europe. The streets outside are cooling, the chatter of the marketplace softens to a hush, and here you are, stepping into a low-roofed workshop where the air is thick with smoke, wax, and the faint tang of animal fat. A single flame dances in an iron holder, throwing shadows that twitch like nervous cats across the walls. Already, you feel the warmth on your face, and the floor creaks beneath your boots. You're about to spend the night in a place where daylight is a luxury, and light itself is a craft people lived and died by. And honestly, you probably won't survive this job more than a week. Your soft, modern fingers would blister, your nose would revolt at the smell, and your patience would burn out faster than a cheap tallow taper. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love for you to comment your location and the local time where you are listening. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The master's shop welcomes you with a grunt from a man bent over a vat. His apron is speckled with pale drops that glisten like candle tears, and the whole room feels alive with quiet, rhythmic motions. You walk carefully between benches loaded with molds and bundles of wick cord, and for a moment, you almost feel like you've wandered into a beehive. Except instead of buzzing wings, it's the whisper of cloth, the scrape of knives, the occasional hiss when fat meets flame. The workshop smells complicated. Part barnyard, part church incense, part kitchen gone wrong. That's because tallow, rendered from sheep, cows, or whatever beasts the butcher sends over, forms the cheapest and most common ingredient. It leaves an odor that clings to your clothes like an unwelcome hug. But across the room, a smaller stash of beeswax sits under cloth, golden and faintly honey-sweet, reserved for wealthy patrons or for the church. Somewhere, you spot a covered cask, brought in from a merchant sailor. He swears it's spermaceti oil from Wales, shimmering like pearl in the firelight, promising a cleaner, brighter burn. You can hear the master explaining, half to you, half to his apprentices. Tallow for the poor, beeswax for the priests, spermaceti if you can afford to gamble. He doesn't look up, just keeps working, because in this trade, daylight isn't your ally. You rely on your own flames to push back the dark, even while making the very thing that creates them. The floorboards are slippery with wax. You nearly skid, and one of the boys smirks, muttering something in French about new boots. Joke number one, at least you didn't end up face first in the vat, though that would have been the 18th century version of a spa treatment. Historians still argue whether the average candle maker was considered a respected artisan or a slightly pitied tradesman. Guild charters suggest skill and ritual, yet tax rolls show they weren't exactly rolling in riches. You catch yourself wondering, do these men think of themselves as artists shaping light, or just laborers selling survival one wick at a time? On the shelf above the workbench, you notice tools, long dipping rods, tin molds with clamped halves, and little knives for trimming hardened wax. Each has its place, because in a world without electric switches, losing track of a tool is as bad as losing track of time itself. The clock here is measured not in minutes, but in cooling, dipping, and drying. The master gestures to the ceiling rafters where rows of half-finished candles dangle like pale stalactites. They swing gently when a door opens, dripping faintly as if breathing. You realize you're standing inside a forest of captured light, each one waiting to be cut down, bundled, and sold to someone desperate for another few hours past dusk. Quirky tidbit number one. Some households unable to afford proper candles would actually reuse leftover drippings, known as ends, by rolling them together into a lumpy end candle. It looked like a mutant carrot, but burned, sort of, and cost practically nothing. You imagine someone proudly lighting their dinner table with one of those and insisting, "It has character." The boys in the shop laugh when a rushlight guttering in the corner sputters and dies. One relights it, showing you how a simple dried rush stalk, dipped in fat, can stand in for a candle. Cheaper, but smoky and fast burning. You can tell which apprentice drew the short straw of tending them because his face is striped with soot like war paint. There's a rhythm to the night. Heat, dip, cool, trim. The wax is alive under your hands, soft when warm, brittle when chilled. You hear the hiss of rendered fat, the creak of ropes strung with wicks, the thump of a mold clamped shut, and slowly you begin to feel how much patience this work requires. Joke number two. Patience you definitely don't have, considering you once microwaved soup and still thought it took too long. As you edge toward the doorway, the master finally glances at you. His eyes are rimmed red from smoke, his beard crusted with wax dust. He doesn't smile, but he nods, a gesture that says, "Yes, you may watch. This isn't a show, it's survival. But maybe, just maybe, there's room for one more pair of eyes." The night outside deepens. Beyond the workshop, the city's lanes are already dim, dotted with the glow of tavern lamps and the occasional torch. But here inside, the little universe of flame and wax hums on, stubborn against the dark. You can almost feel the centuries of craft pressing down on you, whispering that light was never free. It was earned, dripped, poured, and trimmed one candle at a time. Joke number three. And if you complain about your electricity bill next month, just remember, at least you don't have to sniff whale oil to enjoy Netflix. You're still standing in the workshop when the apprentices shuffle past you, carrying bundles of wicks like little ropes of destiny. They glance at you quickly, measuring whether you belong here or whether you're just another nosy stranger who'll faint from the smell. You trail them toward a corner where the master waits, his face half in shadow, half in the quivering glow of a rushlight. He gestures for you to sit, or more accurately, crouch, because the only seat is a rough stool that looks like it survived more burns than birthdays. This is where the oath comes in. No, not a dramatic blood pact with lightning striking outside, though that would make it more cinematic. Instead, it's a surprisingly solemn vow. You promise to respect the guild, keep its secrets, obey the master, and endure the pain of learning without whining. Spoiler, you will whine. In 18th century Europe, many towns kept candle and lamp makers under the wing of a guild, part craft union, part mafia, part school. If you were accepted, you were tied for years, sometimes a decade, to the rhythm of wax, wicks, and relentless work. The master mutters the words, and you repeat them. The apprentices smirk because everyone remembers their first oath and how awkwardly they tripped over the phrasing. Historians still argue whether these oaths were truly sacred or more like workplace contracts with extra drama. But in this moment, you feel the weight of history pressing you into place. And then, before you can congratulate yourself on becoming part of a centuries-old tradition, someone hands you a wick to trim. Simple, right? Wrong. Your hands are clumsy, the wick frays, and within seconds your fingertips are dotted with little stinging burns where you brushed too close to a candle stump. Welcome to initiation by fire, literally. Apprenticeship is not glamorous. You rise before dawn, scrape hardened wax from floors, fetch water, render fat, and stir vats until your arms ache. The journeymen above you get the better jobs, pouring, dipping, shaping, while you learn humility in every drop that splashes on your skin. Joke number one, it's basically the 18th century version of making coffee for the office, except the coffee is molten fat and the boss actually hits you with a stick if you spill it. Still, the system has its rhythm. You work, you watch, you memorize. Slowly, you begin to pick up the secret gestures, the flick of a wrist to straighten a wick, the timing to dip without cracking the wax. The guild insists on repetition because mistakes mean lost profit, and lost profit means someone's supper just vanished into smoke. Quirky tidbit number one, some masters forced apprentices to sleep in the shop itself, curled on straw under dangling rows of half-dried candles. Imagine waking up to a candle forest dripping wax icicles on your hair. Cozy, right? You can almost smell the blend of sweat, straw, and half-melted tallow. The apprentices swap stories as they work, some terrifying, some ridiculous. One boy tells of a shop in Hamburg where a candlemaker supposedly fell asleep over the vat and woke up with his hair stiffened into one giant wax spike. Another insists he once saw a candle burn blue for hours, which everyone debates as either a miracle, a ghost, or just bad fat. Joke number two. Of course, if your candle suddenly glows neon green, congratulations. You've just invented radioactive lighting centuries too early. The master keeps you all on a short leash. Guild rules regulate everything from how many candles you can sell to which festivals require offerings. Break the rules, and you risk fines, shame, or even being expelled. Without the guild, you'd be just another unlicensed faker hawking smoky rushlights in an alley. With it, you carry a badge of honor, even if that badge is mostly invisible and smells faintly of sheep. Yet, beyond the grime and the blisters, there's something almost hypnotic about the order of it all. You begin to sense the deeper current. Making light isn't just labor, it's ritual. Every apprentice here is part of a chain stretching backward centuries, repeating motions that feel both practical and sacred. Historians still argue whether this sense of continuity was genuine devotion or just propaganda to keep apprentices obedient. But as you stare into the glow, it's hard to deny the spell. Hours pass, your fingers ache, and when you finally sit back on the splintered stool, you realize something. You belong to the rhythm now. Light doesn't just happen in this world, it's forged. One blister, one vow, one clumsy cut at a time. Joke number three. And yes, congratulations. You just survived your first day without burning the place down. That alone might be your greatest 18th century achievement. Your hands are still aching from trimming wicks when the master calls you closer to the bench. He lifts a lid from a wooden tub, and suddenly the room tilts with smell. Sharp, greasy, unmistakably animal. That's tallow, the lifeblood of cheap candles rendered down from beef or mutton fat. You gag a little, and the apprentices laugh, because they've all been there. One nudges you with a grin. You'll get used to it, or you won't. comforting. Tallow is the candle of the common folk. It's cheap, plentiful, and, let's be honest, it stinks. Imagine lighting your dining table with something that smells faintly like roasted barnyard while you're trying to eat. You'd get candlelight, yes, but also an uninvited guest called odor. Still, for millions of households across Europe, this was the only option. Over at another bench, the master uncovers a smaller box. This one gleams with something entirely different. Beeswax. Golden, smooth, and carrying the faint perfume of honey and meadow blossoms. Beeswax candles burn brighter, cleaner, and longer. They're what you find in churches, noble halls, and anyone trying to show off wealth. The smell? Divine. The price? Also divine, in the sense that only the heavens could help you afford it regularly. Quirky tidbit number one. In some towns, bakers' guilds and chandlers' guilds actually fought over access to beeswax. Bakers wanted beeswax for fancy pastries and coatings, while candle makers demanded priority for candles. Can you imagine the street fights? Who gets the wax, cake, or candles? Honestly, it sounds like a feud that could power a Netflix miniseries. And then the rarest treasure, spermaceti. Sailors drag it from the head cavities of sperm whales during voyages that last years. It arrives in casks, white and crystalline, almost pearl-like. When melted into candles, spermaceti burns with a brilliance that makes tallow look like a soggy torch. Merchants brag about it, and customers swoon. Clean, bright, steady flames, almost modern in their consistency. The downside? You need whalers crossing half the globe and surviving storms, mutiny, and scurvy just to get it. Historians still argue whether the rise of spermaceti candles really shifted everyday European life or whether it was mostly a luxury novelty. The apprentices gather as the master lets you sniff each sample. Tallow curls your nose. Beeswax soothes you. Spermaceti feels oddly otherworldly, like you've just inhaled moonlight. Joke number one. Shame you can't bottle that smell and sell it as eau de whale head. Though honestly, that might not fly at Sephora. Your task is simple, but delicate. Learn to distinguish these materials by touch. Tallow softens quickly, greasy and pliable. Beeswax holds firmness, smooth under your thumb. Spermaceti almost crunches, like breaking a sugar crystal. Each one behaves differently in the vat, in the mold, and in the flame. Get it wrong, and your customer either curses you for smoke or praises you for purity. The master shows you how adulteration works, too. Some unscrupulous chandlers mix tallow into beeswax candles, pocketing extra coins. To the eye, it might pass, but once lit, the smell betrays the trick. A sharp-nosed buyer could ruin your reputation. Quirky side note. One Parisian guild actually appointed official sniffers, whose sole job was to smell candles and check for fraud. Imagine putting that on your resume. Professional candle sniffer, 15 years experience. As the night stretches, the workshop fills with rhythm. The apprentices scrape, cut, and stir, each one half studying, half daydreaming. You start to think about how strange it is your modern world worries about screen brightness, while theirs revolved around animal fat and whales. Historians still argue whether people in the 18th century experienced darkness differently than we do. Did they fear it more, or simply accept it as normal? You rub your burnt fingers absently. They smell faintly of beeswax now, and you can't help but feel a little proud. Light is no longer something you switch on. It's something you hold, smell, and sacrifice for. Joke number two. Though let's be real, if you tried to pay your electricity bill today with a handful of whale oil, you'd probably get arrested. The master douses a small lamp and nods to the door. The night outside is thick now, pierced only by the glow of taverns and the faint shine of stars. But inside your head, you carry the sense of three worlds: the barnyard, the meadow, and the deep sea. That is the daily palette of light, and from now on, you'll never look at a flame without remembering which creature or hive helped bring it to life. Joke number 3, and yes, somewhere out there, a whale probably still resents you personally for enjoying a brighter bedtime story. You return to the workshop floor, where the real choreography of candle making unfolds: dipping and molding. 2 benches dominate the space, one stacked with dipping rods strung with wicks, the other lined with tin molds that glint in the firelight like soldiers at attention. You're about to learn both methods, and let's be clear, you're going to sweat through your shirt doing it. First comes dipping. The apprentices lead you to a vat of melted tallow, its surface shimmering like a pond in hell. Wicks tied in pairs dangle from wooden rods. The trick is rhythm. Lower them into the vat, hold, then raise them smoothly so the fat coats evenly. Wait a few breaths, let them cool. Then dip again, and again, and again. Dozens of repetitions. Each layer building the candle thicker. You quickly realize this is less artistry and more patience Olympics. The air grows heavy with steam, a greasy fog that clings to your hair. Your arms ache after the 5th dip, and the others laugh. Most apprentices develop biceps before they ever develop skill. Joke number 1. So yes, 18th century candle makers basically invented CrossFit. Their weights just happen to smell like sheep. As you dip, you notice how each apprentice counts under his breath. Not numbers of dips exactly, but beats of cooling time. Too fast and the wax sloughs off in lumps. Too slow and the candle hardens unevenly. It's a kind of music, one that only makes sense if you live in this strange world where seconds are measured by drip speed. Historians still argue whether some guilds taught dipping with strict counts or whether each workshop had its own secret rhythm. Either way, your rhythm is terrible, and your candles look like misshapen carrots. Meanwhile, across the room, a journeyman works with molds. Tin forms stand upright, hollow inside, each shaped like a perfect cylinder. He threads a wick through the center, plugs the bottom with a dab of wax, then pours in molten tallow with steady hands. When it cools, he taps the mold lightly, slides the candle free, and holds it up. Smooth, straight, flawless, everything your carrot candles are not. The master lets you try. You thread a wick, pour carefully, and oops, spill a ladle across the table. The wax hardens instantly, gluing your sleeve to the bench. The apprentices howl. Quirky tidbit number 1, some workshops deliberately left hardened wax splatters on benches as a record of generations, like tree rings, but stickier. You've just added your clumsy mark to history. Molded candles have one major advantage: speed. Dozens can be produced in neat, identical rows, perfect for markets. Dipped candles, by contrast, carry the touch of the hand. Slightly uneven, almost organic? Customers debate which is better. Churches often prefer molded for uniformity. Households settle for dipped, lumps and all. Joke number 2. Think of it as 18th century Apple versus Android. Same function, endless arguments. The journeyman shows you how to trim cooled candles, snipping the ends, evening the base so it will stand in a holder. The smell of fresh wax fills your nose, sweet and oddly comforting, almost enough to make you forget the burns on your fingers. Almost. Hours pass. The rafters above are crowded now, rows of dry and dipped candles swaying slightly whenever someone bumps the bench. They look like pale stalactites in a cave, dripping faintly as they cool. Below, trays of molded candles wait, lined in military precision. It's an entire forest of light in waiting, silently promising to push back the night when summoned. Historians still argue whether molds truly revolutionized the trade or merely supplemented tradition. Some guild records suggest dipped candles dominated well into the 19th century, while others insist molding quickly became standard. The truth? It probably depended on how conservative your master was, or how cheap your clients were. The master finally inspects your work. He frowns at your carrot candles, shakes his head, and mutters something about practice. Then, surprisingly, he slips one into his pocket. Maybe even the ugliest candle has a use, whether for testing wicks, selling at a discount, or simply lighting the chamber pot run at midnight. Joke number 3. Congratulations! You just invented the factory second. Somebody out there is about to curse your craftsmanship in the dark. When the workshop quiets, you glance around at the fruits of labor. Wax drips harden on the floor, tin molds gleam in the firelight, and the smell of hot tallow wraps around you like a sticky blanket. You're exhausted, but in the strange rhythm of dipping, pouring, cooling, you've touched the heartbeat of this world. Candles don't just appear, they grow, layer by layer, pour by pour, until they stand ready to defy the dark. You're starting to believe you can handle this candle business when the master clears his throat and points toward a pile of cord. The wick, he says, is the soul of the candle. A bit dramatic, yes, but after a night in this workshop, you understand. Without a good wick, everything else is wasted. The apprentices haul out skeins of cotton, coarse flax, and even old bits of tow fiber. Your task? Twist and braid them into cords that will carry flame without choking themselves in smoke. Sounds easy, right? Except you quickly learn there's an entire science, 18th century science behind it. If the wick is too loose, the flame flickers and sputters. Too tight, and the wax tunnels, leaving you with a candle that looks like it's hiding from its own light. One apprentice demonstrates braiding cotton into a flat braid. It curls just enough to dip into the melted wax pool, feeding itself steadily. Another shows you round braids, firmer, better for tallow candles that need more discipline to keep from guttering. Historians still argue whether wick braiding was standardized across guilds or if each shop guarded its own secret formula like Grandma's cookie recipe. Judging by the smirks here, it was probably the latter. You try your hand at braiding. Within minutes, your wick unravels into a sad string spaghetti. The apprentices howl, one slapping his thigh so hard he nearly topples into a vat. Joke number 1. Congratulations, you just invented the 18th century shoelace. Once braided, the wicks are primed, dipped quickly in wax so they stiffen, ready to hold their form. The smell of hot wax fills the air again, mingling with the cotton's faint sweetness. Your fingers, still tender from burns, sting as you press the cords flat. But you don't dare complain. Complaints earn extra chores, and no one wants the honor of scrubbing soot from the chimney. The master lights one of your test wicks stuck into a stub of leftover wax. It sputters like a man with a head cold. You wince, but he only shrugs. Every flame has a voice, he mutters. Yours is just hoarse. Comforting in its own way. To remind you that not all light comes from neat little candles, the apprentices drag out a bundle of rushes. These are tall, dried stalks, split and peeled, their pith dipped in fat. One boy strikes flint, and soon a rushlight sputters to life. The flame is small, weak, smoky. It lasts maybe 15 minutes at best. And yet, for the poorest households, this was illumination, a fragile sliver of brightness that cost almost nothing. Quirky tidbit number one. Some families actually scheduled tasks around rushlights, measuring chores in rushlight lengths instead of hours. Imagine telling someone, dinner will be ready in 2 rushlights. The smell is awful, acrid and greasy, filling your nose until your eyes water. The apprentices wave their hands, jokingly fanning the smoke toward you as if christening you with the true essence of poverty lighting. Joke number 2. Congratulations again! You've now invented the 18th century fog machine. Party like it's 1799. But here's the secret. Even bad lights taught valuable lessons. By watching how flames burned, candle makers learned to adjust wick thickness, wax purity, and even placement in holders. One journeyman shows you a trick. Trim the wick at an angle, and the candle burns brighter with less smoke. Another explains how soaking wicks in vinegar before waxing helps them curl into the flame, self-consuming without constant trimming. Historians still argue whether these tricks were universal knowledge or jealously guarded secrets whispered only to trusted apprentices. You practice trimming with little wick scissors called snuffers. They clip the charred tip without extinguishing the flame, a delicate maneuver that makes you feel oddly powerful, snipping death while letting life continue. The glow steadies, brightens. For the first time tonight, you sense you've contributed something that actually works. The master leans on his bench, eyes tired but approving. He reminds everyone that wicks decide whether customers complain about smoke stains on their ceilings or praise your candles for purity. In this world, reputation isn't built on wax, it's built on flame. The rushlight finally gutters out, leaving a thin thread of smoke curling toward the rafters. The apprentices groan, not from sorrow, but from the endless routine of replacing them. One boy jokes that rushlights are like his love life, short, smoky, and disappointing. Joke number 3. And just like that, you realize teenage sarcasm hasn't changed in 300 years. As the night deepens, you braid another cord, dip another wick, and light another stub. This time, the flame catches steady, warm, almost proud. You sit back, watching its little dance, and for a brief moment, you forget the stink, the soot, and the blisters. All you see is fire breathing through cotton, whispering against the dark. The night air in the shop feels heavier now, almost syrupy with the scent of wax and smoke. Just when you think you've adjusted, the master opens a door to the back courtyard. Moonlight spills in, cool and silver, but more striking are the long ropes stretched across wooden frames. They look like laundry lines, except instead of clothes, pale strands of wax-dipped cords dangle stiff and ghostly. You're stepping into the bleaching yard. This is where candles go from yellowish lumps to something approaching elegance. Sunlight, sulfur fumes, or both are used to lighten them. The master explains. Leave the candles out day after day, letting the sun work its slow magic. Or, if you're in a hurry, expose them to burning sulfur. One method smells of patience, the other of rotten eggs. Either way, customers demand pale wax. Dark, streaky candles scream cheap and fetch low prices. Historians still argue whether bleaching was mostly about vanity or whether lighter candles truly burned better. The apprentices, meanwhile, argue over who gets stuck with the sulfur bucket duty. Spoiler, not you. You're new, so they save the fun for later. You wander through the yard, brushing fingertips across the stiff cords. The moon makes them glow faintly, as though the candles are already half alive with flame. It's strangely beautiful, this forest of hanging light. Quirky tidbit number one. Some towns actually complain that bleaching yards ruin the view, describing them as wax cemeteries cluttering up the streets. Imagine trying to sell your house next to one of these lovely two-story pleasant garden, slight odor of sulfur. But bleaching is only half the game. Back inside, another table beckons with little clay pots and bundles of dried herbs. You lean closer. Lavender, rosemary, sage. The apprentices grin and start crushing them into the melted wax. Welcome to the experimental side of the trade. Scented candles, 18th century edition. Not every master allows it. Many dismiss scents as frivolous or wasteful. But where customers have money, demand follows. Lavender promises calm sleep. Rosemary claims to sharpen memory. A few bold chandlers even try mixing powdered ambergris, the waxy substance from the intestines of sperm whales, into batches. It smells oddly marine, musky, and expensive. Joke number one. Yes, you just rubbed whale stomach perfume into your candle. Enjoy your luxury spa vibes. The apprentices crowd around as you sprinkle herbs into a ladle of melted beeswax. The smell of lavender rises, cutting through the ever-present grease. For a moment, the workshop smells almost pleasant. You pour carefully into a mold, and when it cools, you light the wick. The room fills with a faint herbal smoke, not strong but distinctive. The boys clap, though one coughs dramatically, insisting it smells like burnt soup. Historians still argue whether scented candles in this period were widespread or rare indulgences. Surviving records suggest churches used resin and incense, but private households probably stuck to plain wax. Yet the experiments happened, as proven by scattered recipes hidden in apothecary manuals. In truth, candles sat at the crossroads of light and medicine. Some believed herbs burned in wax could ward off illness, protect from plague, or at least cover up the stench of chamber pots. You notice one journeyman dabbing melted rosemary wax on his wrist like perfume. He laughs when you stare, insisting that the ladies appreciate the smell of wisdom. Joke number two. Somewhere in another century, a marketing executive just invented cologne. The master interrupts with a story about a rival shop that once tried cinnamon candles. The result? Mice swarmed the storeroom, chewing through half the stock. Lesson learned. Not every experiment works. Quirky tidbit number two. In some cities, spice candles were banned from marketplaces because they attracted vermin faster than customers. Back in the bleaching yard, you help gather the ropes. Your hands come away chalky, dusted with pale flakes. The moon rides high, and for once, the air outside is fresher than the workshop. You catch yourself thinking, these chandlers lived half in light, half in fumes, always balancing the beauty of flame with the stink of its making. As you tie the bundles together, the master reminds everyone, a candle isn't just wax and wick. It's presentation, reputation, even fashion. Pale, clean candles sell to nobles. Scented experiments tempt the curious. Dark, smoky stubs are left for the desperate. In a city where night lasts forever without them, every shade of light has its buyer. The apprentices shoulder the bundles and shuffle back inside. You trail behind, your clothes dusted white, your nose tingling with lavender and sulfur. Joke number three. You smell like someone buried flowers in a rotten egg. Congratulations, you've nailed the 18th century artisan fragrance line. The workshop quiets for a moment. Only the hiss of cooling wax filling the air. Then the master waves you toward a shelf stacked with odd-shaped vessels. They look nothing like the tidy molds you've been wrestling with. Shallow saucers, clumsy pottery cups, brass dishes blackened with soot. These are lamps, the ancestors of candles, and they tell their own smoky story. He picks up a tiny clay saucer. It's simple, cheap, and ugly, its rim chipped. A wick rests in a pool of hardened fat at the bottom. With a flint strike, the wick flares, coughing up smoke that curls toward the ceiling. The flame wobbles, weak and uneven. You blink through the haze, realizing this is how countless families across Europe once lit their nights. Oil lamps, crude and temperamental. The apprentices snicker when you gag. One explains that olive oil is common in southern Europe, while further north they make do with animal fat. Either way, the lamps drip, sputter, and smoke. The soot-stained ceilings, curtains, even noses. Joke number one, congratulations. You've just invented the 18th century smoke detector. It doesn't beep, it just makes your lungs beep. Historians still argue whether oil lamps or candles dominated in everyday life. Records suggest candles were preferred in colder regions where animal fat was plentiful, while oil lamps lingered in Mediterranean towns. Churches and taverns often mixed both, depending on cost and convenience. Either way, no one loved the mess. Cleaning wicks and scraping soot was part of the daily grind. One apprentice shows you how to trim a lamp wick. He pinches off the charred end, then carefully nudges it forward so the flame steadies. You notice how delicate the balance is. Too much wick, and the lamp smokes. Too little, and it dies. The boy mutters that tending lamps feels like babysitting, except the baby screams smoke instead of tears. Joke number two. And unlike babies, lamps don't grow up and move out. The master drags you outside into the alley. The street is lit by a scatter of these lamps, flickering like dying stars. Some sit in iron brackets, others in glass lanterns meant to shield them from the wind. But the glow is weak, patchy, barely enough to see your feet. Shadows swallow the corners, and the air reeks of burned oil. You suddenly appreciate why people move fast after dark. Lingering too long meant stumbling, or worse, getting robbed in the cover of half-light. Quirky tidbit number one. Some city watchmen were actually paid in lamp oil as part of their wages. They'd lug around little flasks, topping up lamps while making their rounds. Of course, some pocketed the oil instead. Black market lamp fuel was surprisingly lucrative. Imagine being mugged not for your wallet, but for your olive oil. Back in the workshop, you fiddle with a brass lamp shaped like a tiny teapot. Its handle is scorched, its spout twisted from years of heat. You pour in oil, light the wick, and watch as the glass chimney above it fogs almost instantly with soot. It's functional, sure, but far from elegant. You can't help thinking, this is a world where light itself feels like a luxury battle. Every flame bought with sweat, stink, and compromise. The journeyman near you shrugs. Candles, lamps, it's all the same. You feed it, it burns. You starve it, it dies. His voice is flat, but there's wisdom in it. You realize that to these workers, flame isn't magical. It's survival in a jar, survival on a wick. Historians still argue whether these humble lamps prepared people to embrace the new lighting technologies that would arrive later, or whether they clung to candles out of stubbornness. You can almost feel the tension, the old saucer flame guttering against the new, brighter future waiting just around the corner. The master snuffs out the lamp with a sharp breath. Smoke coils up like a last complaint. He gestures at the soot-marked ceiling beams, testimony to years of greasy fires. This, he says, is why we make better. You nod, eyes watering, lungs heavy. Joke number 3. And you silently promise that next time you light a scented candle at home, you'll thank every ancestor who put up with this oily nonsense first. The next morning, you notice something different in the air. The apprentices chatter nervously while the master fusses with a tall, gleaming object in the corner. It's an argand lamp, a marvel you've only heard whispers about in the marketplace. A glass chimney, a circular wick, and a reservoir designed to make flames steady and bright. It practically hums promise. He demonstrates by filling the reservoir with oil, adjusting the wick, and lighting it. Immediately, the difference is staggering. The flame stands tall, clean, almost alive, without the choking smoke of your old saucer lamps. Shadows retreat gracefully. The room fills with a quiet, confident glow. You feel, without fully realizing it, that the future has just elbowed its way into this dusty workshop. The apprentices crowd around, awestruck. They whisper about how much oil it consumes, how precise the wick must be, how the glass chimney keeps it safe. You poke your finger near the flame and instinctively recoil. So much power in something so small. Joke number 1. It's basically the 18th century version of "don't touch, it's hot," a rule humans have universally ignored since forever. Historians still argue whether the argand lamp truly revolutionized domestic life or mainly remained a status symbol for the wealthy. Evidence shows it lit parlors and taverns beautifully, yet most average households continued with tallow candles and saucer lamps well into the 19th century. The contrast between old and new is striking. On one side, smoky survival. On the other, controlled brilliance. The master lets you handle one, carefully guiding your hands around the glass. You notice how the flame doesn't flicker dramatically, how it refuses to gutter unless provoked. There's an elegance in that stubborn steadiness. You almost forget the sore fingers and acrid smells of yesterday. Quirky tidbit number 1. In Paris, some socialites became so obsessed with argand lamps that they decorated entire salons around them, treating light as both status and spectacle. Imagine a chandelier that's more about engineering than aesthetics. You learn about adjusting the wick height, controlling the airflow, and balancing the oil-to-flame ratio. It's delicate work. One misstep and the flame curls, smokes, or dies. You can't help noticing how every little adjustment feels like coaxing life itself. The apprentices joke about the lamps being divas, and you laugh quietly. Joke number 2. In their defense, they are demanding, exacting divas. Meanwhile, outside, the sun rises over the city, bathing roofs in gold. You glance at your old dipping vats and tallow piles, realizing how revolutionary a simple piece of glass can be. The argand lamp doesn't just illuminate, it reshapes the rhythm of the workshop, the planning of the market, even the way clients will judge your skill. Historians still argue whether argand lamps impacted safety as much as light quality. Some claim households avoided fires, while others point out that inexperienced users sometimes spilled oil, creating hazards worse than a dripping tallow stub. In any case, you can see why the old hands mutter under their breath about newfangled gadgets while secretly admiring the glow. The master dims the old saucer lamps for comparison. You watch one gutter and die almost theatrically, smoke curling upward while the argand stands serenely in the center, steady and elegant. A small, almost imperceptible triumph fills the room. You feel the weight of centuries in that tiny lamp. Innovation meeting tradition, compromise meeting ambition. And as you handle it carefully, guiding the flame without smothering it, you realize something profound. Fire, in this corner of the world, has always been a teacher. First, it demanded skill, then patience, and now, respect for ingenuity. Joke number 3, and also a subtle reminder that no matter how advanced lamps get, they still refuse to make your morning coffee. The glow of the argand lamp doesn't just impress apprentices, it brings new worries. Fire, after all, was the ever-present specter of 18th century workshops. You glance at the ceiling beams, thick with soot and scars, and realize every blaze you've managed, or nearly caused, was a negotiation with disaster. The master clears his throat and gestures toward a table piled with sand buckets, iron hooks, and a small coil of rope. "Precautions," he mutters. Every night, watchmen patrol the streets outside, rattling their wooden clappers to ward off thieves and warn of fires. But inside, it's your job to respect the rules that prevent catastrophe. A single spilled vat of tallow, a knocked-over lamp, or an over-ambitious dip could ignite chaos. Joke number 1. In other words, welcome to 18th century OSHA, where the hazard pay is zero and the risk of looking foolish is infinite. You help check the fire buckets, scraping soot and refilling sand. Each tool has a purpose. Hooks for dragging burning beams, damp cloths to smother flames, and bell alarms, small iron devices that clang if someone smells smoke in the workshop. One apprentice whispers about a shop down the street that burned 3 times in a decade. The master nods grimly. Not cheap lessons. Quirky tidbit number 1. Some guilds mandated apprentices sleep with a bucket of water at the bedside in winter months. Fires tended to start in chimneys or near oil lamps, and a quick splash could save a family. Imagine waking up at midnight, face pressed to frozen water just because someone wanted to trim a wick too aggressively. Meanwhile, you overhear a debate among journeymen about insurance. Yes, insurance existed, in a rudimentary way. Some guilds offered collective fire relief funds, pooling coins to help rebuild after accidents. But it was rare and limited. Most workshops relied on vigilance, luck, and guilt to avoid disasters. Historians still argue whether these funds genuinely prevented ruin or simply offered the illusion of security. The master demonstrates how to carry a lit argan lamp safely from one bench to another, pivoting smoothly so the flame doesn't flicker or drip. It feels precarious at first. One misstep and a cascade of oil could spill. Joke number 2. And yes, you're the clumsy human equivalent of a fireworks show waiting to happen. Outside, the alley remains quiet. Only the faint rattle of the watchman breaking the night silence. You imagine what would happen if one of these streets caught fire. Narrow lanes, tightly packed houses, wooden roofs. Disaster is just a single spark away. Every precaution, every bucket, every iron hook matters. Inside again, apprentices practice safe lamp handling. They place the lit argand in a sand tray, then lift it, twist it, and test stability. Your fingers are steady now, but not confident. You realize that mastery here isn't just about technique. It's about anticipation, predicting misfortune before it strikes. Quirky tidbit number 2, some masters trained apprentices to shout "fire," even when testing lamps, to simulate panic conditions. Nothing like a little fake chaos to teach calm hands. You participate reluctantly, yelling and flinching at your own voice, earning a chorus of laughter. The master reminds everyone that vigilance doesn't stop at the shop. Streets, taverns, and homes all carry fire risk. Smoke alarms are non-existent. Lamps are unpredictable. Every client candle could start a tiny inferno if mishandled. You nod solemnly, imagining your own modern apartment in candlelight, thinking it's safe. Ha! History has a cruel sense of humor. Joke number 3. And yes, today's electric bulbs owe their popularity partly to the fact that your 18th century ancestors were terrified of setting their ceilings on fire. By the end of the night, you've handled buckets, hooks, lamps, and sand, gaining a sense of respect bordering on awe for these everyday guardians of flame. Fire isn't just a tool, it's an authority, a teacher, a trickster, and sometimes a tyrant all at once. And now, after scraping, lifting, and tipping, you understand that survival in a workshop isn't measured by skill alone, but by constant disciplined attention to risk. The next day begins with the rhythmic scrape of knives against hardened wax. You're pulled into trimming duty, and for a moment, it feels almost meditative. Every candle dipped or molded demands attention. Uneven bottoms, lumpy sides, crooked wicks, all are punished with a master's sharp gaze. You trim, snip, and file. Fingers sticky, arms sore, but the pattern of motion begins to soothe rather than exhaust. Trimming is deceptively simple. You learn to judge by eye, feeling for imperfections, knowing when a candle will burn straight or tunnel. A poorly trimmed candle can smoke endlessly or burn unevenly, wasting precious wax and frustrating a customer. Joke number 1. It's the 18th century version of proofreading a document, except your mistakes literally stink and could start a fire. Meanwhile, apprentices debate the aesthetics of candle shapes. Should a taper be perfectly cylindrical, or is a slight curve more authentic? The master smiles knowingly, letting the argument unfold. Quirky tidbit number 1. In some towns, candle buyers actually preferred tapered ends that leaned slightly. They believed it helped the flame dance better. Imagine a customer negotiating over a centimeter of curvature while your hands smell faintly of sheep fat. You're introduced to specialty candles, molded figures for celebrations, miniature wax animals for children, even candles dyed with natural pigments. One apprentice shows a vivid red candle made from cochineal. The color is striking, a small luxury in a world dominated by plain yellows and whites. Historians still argue whether these colored candles were practical or purely decorative, though surviving records suggest the wealthy splurged on them for status and ceremony. Next comes bundling. Candles must be tied, stacked, and prepared for sale or transport. You fumble with string at first, trying not to crush the soft wax. The apprentices chuckle, recalling their first attempts. Joke number 2. Congratulations! You've just invented the 18th century packaging fail. In between duties, the master offers a lecture on market strategy. Some candles go directly to households. Others are sent to taverns, churches, or guild members. Prices vary by material, size, and demand. Tallow is cheap but smoky. Beeswax is clean but costly. Spermaceti is almost untouchable by ordinary people. Customers judge value by appearance, burn time, and, surprisingly, scent. You watch as apprentices sort candles by type, tying thin tallow tapers in bundles of 12, beeswax tapers in 4s, and spermaceti individually in straw-lined boxes. The process is precise. One slip, one crooked bundle, and the candle may be unsellable. It's tedious, yet there's rhythm and repetition, a quiet poetry in arranging light before it even burns. Quirky tidbit number 2. In some coastal towns, candle merchants traded them for fish, grain, or salt. Candles weren't just currency, they were commodities in a barter economy. You imagine walking into a tavern and handing over a dozen tapers for a catch of herring, wondering if the bartender appreciated the craftsmanship. The apprentices gossiped quietly about unusual clients. One noblewoman allegedly demanded candles shaped like miniature swans. A local priest preferred candles carved into spirals that supposedly represented heavenly ascent. Historians still argue whether these unusual requests were common or isolated indulgences, but it's clear that status played a huge role in the candle economy. By late afternoon, you're tired but oddly satisfied. The trimming, bundling, and sorting have left you with sticky hands, a sore back, and a head full of tiny, flickering lights. Each candle, no matter how imperfect, carries its own history, its own purpose. Joke number 3, and you realize you'll never complain about a crooked candle on a birthday cake again? The master dims the workshop lights, letting the apprentices admire their day's work. Rows of candles stand ready, pale and firm, soft shadows dancing across their smooth surfaces. You feel the weight of all those tiny flames waiting to illuminate lives you'll never see, and it's humbling. Here, in the rhythm of wax, wicks, and careful hands, you finally understand light is earned, and every flicker is testimony to patience, craft, and human persistence. By the time evening arrives, the workshop hums with a slower, almost reflective energy. The master signals that it's time for inventory, a painstaking ritual that can stretch for hours. You're handed a quill and parchment, instructed to record every candle, every wick, and every leftover scrap. Mistakes are frowned upon. Accuracy here means the difference between profit and shame. You trudge from bench to bench, tallying stacks of tallow tapers, beeswax tapers, and the precious spermaceti candles, your fingers leaving faint, waxy smudges on the paper. Joke number 1. Apparently, 18th century accounting smells faintly of barnyard. You glance at a jar of cochineal dyed wicks and wonder if someone has ever tried to eat them by mistake. Quirky tidbit number 1. Some apprentices secretly nibbled wax bits, claiming it helped them understand the material better, or at least it made for an amusing snack. The master inspects your tally carefully. Mistakes cost more than wax, he mutters, nodding toward a ledger where miscounted candles once led to a month of unpaid labor for a hapless apprentice. Historians still argue whether guild oversight was truly protective or a way to assert control over labor. But either way, it's not a debate you want to be caught in while holding a quill. After the ledger is complete, attention turns to packing candles for transport. You learn to cushion them with straw, wrap them in cloth, and secure them in crates. Beeswax candles are treated with particular care. One dent, one crack, and the expense of the material is wasted. Tallow candles are bundled more casually, meant to be practical rather than elegant. The apprentices joke about how these crates are like medieval Amazon packages, minus the tracking number. Joke number 2. And yes, they will probably arrive half melted anyway. Outside, a cart waits. The master loads it with crates bound with rope. The street is narrow, uneven, and filled with the smells of horse, smoke, and refuse. You steady the boxes, careful not to jostle the precious cargo. In this world, distribution is as much a skill as production. A candle might be perfect, but if it arrives crushed, all effort is wasted. Quirky tidbit number 2. Some merchants tied scented herbs into the bundles to mask the stench of tallow. Lavender or rosemary served double duty, making the crate smell pleasant and providing a minor deterrent against pests. You can't help imagining smug rats being thwarted by a sprig of rosemary. Journeymen discuss which markets to hit first. Local households take the cheap tallow tapers. Wealthier clients receive beeswax. Spermaceti is reserved for noble patrons or high-ranking clergy. The master explains that a candle's market determines not only its price but the level of care and transport. Historians still argue whether this tiered system truly reflected demand or merely reinforced social hierarchy. But standing among crates of wax, you feel the weight of centuries of structured commerce. Back in the workshop, the apprentices clean their tools and benches. Scraping hardened wax, washing pots, and polishing tins is tedious but necessary. Your hands ache, your arms are sore, but there's a satisfaction in order restored. The master lets you light a small batch of finished candles, just enough to illuminate the room and remind everyone why they endure the labor. The flames flicker softly across straw and timber, small sentinels of patience and craft. Joke number 3. And yes, if one of these tapers flickers out prematurely, it's not your fault. It's clearly conspiring against you. Still, you can't help but smile. Each candle represents hours of effort, centuries of tradition, and the promise that tomorrow the cycle begins anew. The following morning, the master introduces you to the nuances of specialized candles, those made for rituals, ceremonies, and seasonal festivals. These are not your average tapers. Each shape, size, and color carries meaning, from the slender, elongated church tapers to the twisted, spiraled candles meant for solstice celebrations. Handling them, you feel the subtle difference between utility and symbolism. You start with church candles. Beeswax is preferred. The purity, aroma, and steady flame suit sacred spaces. The master guides your hands as you pour molten wax into molds shaped like slender columns, occasionally pressing in subtle flutes along the side. Quirky tidbit number 1. Some churches actually recorded complaints if the fluting was uneven, arguing that irregularity disrupted the spiritual flow of the flame. Imagine the congregation storming the vestry over decorative grooves. Historians still argue whether religious candle rituals shaped the broader candle industry or merely reflected the prevailing taste for sophistication. Either way, you notice the reverence in the way these candles are handled, the hush of the workshop, and the meticulous care that separates sacred wax from ordinary tapers. Next, you tackle festival candles. Twisted and dyed in vibrant red, green, or even blue, these candles are lighter, more decorative, and sometimes scented. The master shows how to twist 2 differently colored rods together, producing a marbled effect. Joke number 1. It's basically 18th century tie-dye, except you can't wear it as a shirt and you risk burning your fingers. The apprentices gather around to watch, occasionally laughing at each other's failed attempts. Your first twist comes out lopsided, flame-fearing, and entirely whimsical. The master smirks, reminding you that skill comes with repetition. Each candle must convey celebration, joy, or solemnity, depending on its intended ritual. One slip, and the meaning can be lost, or worse, insult intended recipients. Scented festival candles offer another challenge. Herbs and spices, rosemary, cinnamon, cloves, are added to the molten wax for aromatic effect. You stir carefully, inhaling the mingled smells. Quirky tidbit number 2. Some European towns believed cinnamon-scented candles could ward off evil spirits during winter festivals. Smoke was considered a messenger to the gods, carrying prayers, wishes, and perhaps gossip. After hours of twisting, pouring, and scenting, you begin stacking the finished candles in crates lined with straw. Each crate is labeled meticulously. Red twists, festival; spiral beeswax, church; clove-scented tapers. You feel like a librarian of light, cataloging tiny sentinels that will illuminate everything from altars to hearths. Joke number 2. And yes, at this point, you're also cataloging your own finger burns, counting them like badges of honor. By late afternoon, the workshop is filled with a kaleidoscope of light possibilities. You pause to admire rows of colored tapers, spirals, and slender columns, each waiting for its turn to perform. The air smells faintly sweet with herbs and wax, a strange contrast to the lingering tallow odors from the previous week. The master explains that while ordinary tapers fuel daily life, these ceremonial candles define culture. They mark celebrations, signal wealth, and even influence trade. Merchants often advertise the latest seasonal designs months in advance. Historians still argue whether the decorative candles were a response to popular demand or a clever creation of the guilds to boost sales. Finally, the apprentices light a sample of festival candles. The spirals glow, shadows dance, and you feel the culmination of hours of labor, tradition, and innovation. Joke number 3. And yes, somewhere a lopsided candle is probably being worshipped anyway, proving that intention matters more than perfection. By midweek, you're introduced to the art of candle repair, a skill almost as important as making them. Wax cracks, wicks break, and mishaps in transport leave imperfections that could ruin a sale. Your job? Salvage what can be salvaged, making old or damaged candles sellable again. The master shows you a small pile of broken tapers, some half melted, others snapped in awkward angles. The first task is redipping. You carefully heat a vat of wax, holding the broken candle so the new layer adheres smoothly. Too hot, and it melts the old wax unevenly. Too cool, and it forms chunky blobs. Joke number 1. Congratulations. You've basically invented 18th century candle plastic surgery. Fingers sticky, arms sore. You work with surprising precision. Quirky tidbit number 1. In some towns, chandlers kept scrap wax from damaged candles in jars labeled by color, scent, and material, almost like a candy store for rejects. A creative apprentice could mix scraps to produce new multicolored or marbled tapers, a surprisingly popular novelty. You try one, and it looks questionable. The apprentices laugh. You've just invented the abstract candle. Next, you repair wicks. Some are charred or bent, others are frayed. The master demonstrates inserting new braided cotton into hardened wax, melting slightly to secure it, and trimming precisely. This is delicate work. A misaligned wick can tunnel or burn unevenly, spoiling hours of effort. Historians still argue whether wick repair was considered part of the craft or a menial task assigned only to apprentices. Judging by the master's glare, it's both. A lesson in patience and humility. Then come molded candles. One giant spermaceti candle has a small dent caused during transport. You scrape, remold, and gently heat it, smoothing the surface until it regains form. The apprentices joke that you're basically a wax surgeon for aristocrats' luxury items. Joke number 2. And yes, your patient refuses anesthesia. Cleaning and reusing molds is another crucial step. wax residue builds up, and any imperfection can ruin the next candle. You scrape, wash, and polish metal and tin forms until they gleam. Quirky tidbit number 2. Some mold designs were so intricate, spirals, flowers, even animal shapes, that apprentices swore they were cursed if a candle cracked mid-production. You cautiously polish a mold shaped like a miniature owl, whispering apologies. By evening, you handle a stack of repaired candles, now almost indistinguishable from new ones. You marvel at the transformation. What began as broken or flawed now gleams ready for sale. The master nods approvingly. He reminds you that the value of repair lies not just in salvaging material, but in preserving reputation. A candle with a weak flame or crooked wick can undo weeks of work. The apprentices light a few repaired samples. The flames steady, shadows dance, and you notice the subtle difference between old and new wax, slightly denser, slightly seasoned with the history of its first life. Historians still argue whether these repairs were mostly practical or whether they subtly influenced candle aesthetics, but standing among the rows of flickering light, the distinction feels almost philosophical. Joke number 3. And yes, if one of these candles fails spectacularly, you silently blame the apprentice who dared laugh during your meticulous scraping. The workshop hums with quiet satisfaction, fingers sticky, noses tinged with herbs and tallow, and the pervasive, unshakable rhythm of craft. The next task transports you from repair to innovation, experimenting with materials and shapes that could fetch higher prices. The master sets out a table with beeswax, tallow, spermaceti, and even scraps of colored wax. He encourages you to think beyond standard tapers, twists, spirals, molded animals, and multi-wick constructs that promise novelty and prestige. You start by mixing colored wax, attempting a marbled effect. Pink blends with cream, yellow streaks through pale blue. The apprentices peek over your shoulder, smirking as your first attempt wobbles into a mess. Joke number 1. Congratulations, you've just invented Abstract Modern Art 18th Century Edition. Quirky tidbit number 1. Some wealthy clients actually commissioned messy candles as conversation pieces, embracing imperfection as eccentric taste. Next, you try multiple wick candles. They require careful spacing, balanced heat distribution, and a steady hand to pour wax without displacing one wick. The master reminds you that too close and wicks compete, creating uneven burns. Too far and one flame dominates. You adjust, sweat forming on your brow, and finally achieve a balanced multi-flame. Historians still argue whether these experimental designs were practical for everyday use or strictly decorative indulgences. Scented innovations follow. You crush herbs and mix them into molten wax, layering fragrances so that one candle releases rosemary first, then lavender. The apprentices marvel at your first attempt, though one jokes that it smells like a herbal salad left out too long. Joke number 2. And yes, your nose is now officially confused by the complex aroma. Finally, you experiment with size and shape. Tall, slender spires, squat, ornate columns, spirals with delicate ridges. Each demands precise pouring, cooling, and occasional gentle sculpting while still warm. Quirky tidbit number 2. Some chandlers believe that flame behave differently depending on the candle's spiral angle, a combination of superstition and observation that drove endless debate in guild meetings. By evening, the workshop glows with innovation. Your experiments, some more successful than others, stand proudly among traditional candles. The master examines each creation, nodding thoughtfully. Experimentation fuels the trade, he remarks. Without it, light stagnates. You watch as apprentices whisper, jot notes, and steal ideas for future trials. Historians still argue whether these experiments directly influenced market trends or if they were occasional indulgences that satisfied only the creative whims of masters and apprentices. Regardless, the room pulses with possibility, every flickering flame a testament to human ingenuity and the endless pursuit of better light. Joke number 3. And yes, some of these candles will likely never survive market scrutiny, but you know they'll bring joy to someone's hearth, or at least a funny story for posterity. You step back, surveying rows of traditional, repaired, and experimental candles. There's pride in every wobbly wick, in every marbled twist, in every fragrant swirl. Here, centuries of craft converge, and you feel the pulse of history beneath the smoke and wax. The week winds down, and the workshop has a slower, more reflective rhythm. You notice that you've begun to move instinctively, handling wicks, pouring wax, adjusting molds without thinking. Your fingers remember the feel of molten beeswax, the resistance of braided cotton, and the delicate tension of a wick standing proud. It's comforting, almost meditative, the quiet pulse of labor syncing with the soft hiss of cooling wax. Today, the master gathers the apprentices for a final demonstration, combining everything you've learned into a single production cycle. From choosing materials to finishing, repairing, and even lightly scenting, the goal is a candle that exemplifies skill, patience, and creativity. You feel the weight of the lesson. Light isn't just wax and wick, it's craft, culture, and centuries of trial and error. Joke number 1. And yes, your hands are still sticky enough to convince any visitor that you've been wrestling ghosts instead of wax. You start with beeswax, pouring into a tall mold while carefully inserting a pre-braided wick. The flame from the test candle dances along your peripheral vision, reminding you of past lessons in patience, trimming, and safety. Quirky tidbit number 1. Some master chandlers swore that the wick must be lit first in order to warm the wax to its true potential, a mixture of superstition and observation that endures in whispered guild lore. Next comes experimentation. You decide to twist 2 colors together, creating a gentle marbled effect, and add a hint of rosemary for scent. The apprentices gather, commenting, joking, comparing techniques. Historians still argue whether these creative indulgences genuinely influenced local markets or remained minor curiosities. But you can see how imagination fuels pride in workmanship. By mid-afternoon, trimming begins. You handle snuffers delicately, shaping each wick for optimal burn. The room smells faintly of herbs, wax, and tallow, blending into an oddly comforting perfume that feels like history itself. Joke number 2. And yes, if someone sniffed your sleeve, they'd assume you'd been resting with a botanical candle dragon. The final step is stacking and packing. You layer candles carefully in straw-lined crates, checking for balance, symmetry, and presentation. One misaligned taper is quickly nudged into position, a small act of precision that brings disproportionate satisfaction. Quirky tidbit number 2. In some towns, apprentices competed to see who could create the most visually pleasing stack, calling it the Candle Olympics. As dusk falls, you light a selection of finished candles. The workshop glows warmly, shadows dancing across walls and benches, a panorama of soft illumination earned through skill, mistakes, and persistence. Joke number 3. And yes, if one of these candles sputters, it's clearly conspiring for dramatic effect, just like the apprentices predicted. You take a moment to inhale deeply, appreciating the mingling scents and the glow. The master nods, satisfied. You've seen, handled, and learned. The making of light is labor, art, science, and ritual intertwined. From humble tallow tapers to scented experimental creations, every candle carries its story, its history, its small triumph. The evening stretches softly around you, the workshop's bustle fading into a gentle hush. You sink onto a bench, hands sticky, muscles sore, yet calm, watching the flames you helped nurture dance slowly across their wicks. Shadows stretch and curl in quiet rhythm, and the smell of wax, herbs, and smoke lingers faintly, wrapping around you like a warm blanket. In this stillness, the lessons of the week settle gently, one by one. You remember the first fumbling attempts, the way wax clung stubbornly to your fingers, the way wicks unraveled in your hands. And now, here you are, guiding flame with care, coaxing light from molten wax, shaping candles that will illuminate homes, altars, and celebrations. Every gesture, every trim, every careful pour is a testament to patience, craft, and history itself. Outside, the city breathes in darkness, the flickering glow of distant lamps and candles painting quiet, scattered strokes across cobblestones. You imagine families reading by candlelight, children watching shadows dance on walls, a faint, smoke-scented comfort in the night air. The light you helped create is not just practical, it is intimate, alive, a bridge between hands, hearths, and hearts. You take a deep breath, exhaling slowly. The sticky residue on your skin becomes a tactile memory of effort, discovery, and small victories. The hum of the evening, soft clatter of distant shutters, the rustle of leaves, the subtle hiss of a cooling wick wraps around you. Time feels slower here, gentle, expansive, as though each moment stretches to accommodate reflection. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let the warmth of this week's lessons drift through your mind. Let the flickering flames, the scent of wax and herbs, and the quiet rhythm of the workshop lull you toward rest. Every candle you've touched, every flame you've nurtured is a reminder. Even in darkness, careful hands can create gentle, lasting light.